Welcome to Intersect, a podcast where we find connection in each other's story. Today, I'm with Samuel Ikonne. Mm-hmm. Now, we met in kind of an interesting way. Your wife, Lindsay, put out an SOS on a hospitality app that connects people across the country. Mm-hmm. And it was actually a Facebook group. And my brother-in-law, Charlie, saw it. He called my wife, Ingrid, and says, mm-hmm. Hey, Samuel and Lindsay are coming to Minneapolis. You're here for...
let's see. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Probably 5 days, 5 or 6 days.
And it's a medical
education conference, yeah.
Okay. All right. So they were coming to town. We're looking on the weekend to go to church. And so we're about 30 minutes north. And so drove down, pick them up. We hung out for the day. We had an amazing time.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah. And as we got to talking, I discovered some cool things about Samuel and Lindsay and God's leading and calling in their life. And I want him to kind of help us see what God's been up to. So here we are. Mm-hmm. And if there's a little noise in the background, that's because we're at the Hilton in Minneapolis where the medical conference has been taking place. Just got over today at noon.
Yes, ended at noon today, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so there's people coming and going. So if you hear stuff in the background, just know that it's like you're sitting right here with us in the hallway outside the auditorium where the conference took place.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, mm-hmm. So Samuel, tell us a little bit about your journey. What brought you to this point that you're here as a medical educator, and then there's some other stuff you're up to that we're going to hear about in a little bit.
Yeah, so you kind of want the chronology of how I ended up becoming a medical educator. It's pretty
well, yeah. Especially as you see God's leading that process.
Yes, well, then for sure, yes, I can definitely tell that story. So I think I'll be honest, medical education was not initially part of my plan. Yeah, put it that way. I know when I graduated from college, I got a bachelor's degree in neuroscience, and with a degree in America in 2004, you figure you get a great job. And I ended up actually I had one job with sleep medicine, and my mom kind of had some connections to the hospital. I was like, I don't know if I really want to do that. So then, of course, I'm staying in my parents' home. They're like, well, you got to work. So then I found a job as a cashier at, I don't know. I shouldn't say where. I'll just say. Okay. I was a cashier, yes. And then I ended up was like, well, I think I want to go to school, get my PhD, and part of it is because at the time I started teaching young people at church. Sure. And I found that I was like, I like this. I like engaging young people to teach. So originally I was going to go to school, get my PhD. So I can, teach kids undergrad, because I had a good experience at undergrad. So that was my plan. I was going to be an undergrad teacher. And
were you looking at maybe a Christian college then, or?
Yeah, I think my plan. Honestly, my plan was probably to work at a Christian college. I really didn't have any grand expectations. Not saying I'm doing anything grand now, but I'm just saying I just was thinking, I'll get a PhD, maybe work at a Christian college, and I'll just kind of go from there. But it's interesting because I can see, God's hand even from the beginning. Because I remember when I applied for graduate school, I applied to different schools, and I ended up, I kind of applied early. Maybe that's what was going on. I kind of applied early, and I just kind of applied, and then I felt like, well, instead of waiting or what have you, let me go do something, because I have all this extra time. So I actually went to go work at a place called Advent Home with troubled youth. Oh, interesting. And so I spent some time doing that. But there was a point, and I remember distinctly, it was 2006 in March. And I remember I was like, something was like, it's like, Lord, where am I supposed to be? What do you want me to do? And I remember that prayer I prayed when I was in kind of like my room, just by myself praying, and just praying like really deeply, not knowing what's going on. And the school that I thought I wanted to go into, I hadn't heard from, so I assumed I hadn't gone in. And I remember praying, I think it was on a Sunday, and just like, Lord, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And then like later that week, my parents called and they said, "Oh, we got a mail." And I think my mom was she's kind of emotional. She's like, "Yeah, you got into the graduate school." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know. Yeah, I got into the graduate school."
Now, was this where you were hoping to go? Or?
Yeah, it was where I was hoping to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to that graduate school where I was hoping to go. And, you know, it was kind of like, wow, you know, because it was, you know, maybe things were working in the background the whole time, and I just hadn't heard. I hadn't heard anything. You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's how it is, right? You're like, you're wondering what's going on. You haven't heard anything. And then next thing you know, it's like the Lord was already working it out without me realizing. And it was a school that I wanted to get to. And I was like, this is great, you know? And now the interesting about this is I remember when I started school, a couple of years into school, I had some of my classmates, they were talking about how the interview process to get into graduate school.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you, I didn't interview.
What?
Yeah, I didn't interview. Like my friends were talking about, oh yeah, do you remember when you came? We had to interview and all this other stuff. And
so the graduate school sees you on paper. They'd never met you, and they go like, "This guy can do it."
Yeah.
Or maybe God just like gives them a divine lobotomy.
That it was just interesting, right? Because I just usually that's a process that I thought maybe they just saw my application and like, yeah, maybe he's good, and I had good scores. But talking to some of my colleagues, a lot of them talked about getting interviewed. I don't know, maybe things are, maybe
that's some kind of like affirmation, like you're supposed to be there.
Yeah, I believe I was supposed to be there. As we go more into my story, I believe I was supposed to be there. And yeah, I mean, it was just kind of one of those crazy things where, you're hearing other people talking about their process and what they had to do to actually get into school, and I didn't have those same barriers. I just applied, and I ended up getting in. So that was kind of like the first intersection, and then later it was kind of nice because where I was going to school, I kind of intentionally placed it because there was another college, and I was thinking, well, I'm not married, maybe. Maybe I'll meet somebody. I ended up meeting my wife, my now wife, and a girlfriend at a Bible study. A girlfriend at the time at a Bible study, and we got to meet. And it probably wouldn't happen if I wasn't at that school.
So you're at this specific school. Your wife's in that same part of the country,
right? And
you're at a Bible study.
Yeah,
together.
Exactly. Yeah, and what's really interesting is that my wife was actually in Korea. So when we met December of 2010.
Okay.
New Year's
Eve.
New Year's Eve, yeah. Huh. Now, what's really interesting...
Did you kiss under the mistletoe?
No, we didn't do it.
Not yet.
No, we didn't. Not yet. But what's really interesting that let's say, a few months earlier, she wasn't actually in Korea. She was teaching English in Korea.
Okay.
And she had a strong impression that she needed to leave Korea. Yeah, she had a strong impression that she needed to leave Korea. And she was actually trying to apply to all these other places, and they were saying no. Lebanon, no. All these other places were saying no for her to go teach. So she kind of felt like, well, maybe it's time for me to come home to Oregon. So I think around September of 2010, she ended up actually going to Oregon. And then she came to Texas because she wanted to help with a cousin, and then also too, her brother was actually at the school, and it's like, hey, well, if you need a place to stay, you can stay. She didn't have a job, she didn't have any money, so it's like just seeing all these things line up to where we actually met.
So she's like, it's almost like she wasn't even, why am I coming here? What am I doing? Yeah. All these doors are closing, and voila, New Year's Eve. It's going to be a new day.
Yeah, exactly. And then I just remember that day. The only thing special about that day is I remember I was wearing a green sweater, and I went to Subway and I got a haircut. So I still remember that day.
The Lord was like, brother, you need to look good for tonight.
Exactly. I got a haircut. I was wearing a green sweater, and there's actually a photo. You can find it on Facebook of one of our first conversations. Yeah,
ooh, I might have to use that photo for like the front of the podcast.
Yeah. So all that. I mean, it was just a blessing. I can say with my wife, in terms of, she really kind of helped solidify views on marriage with regards to looking for a spouse, not just for yourself, but for mission.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? I think, oftentimes when we look at marriage, it's just natural. Sometimes we kind of have view it from a selfish point of view. Like, Lord, give me somebody that I want. And don't get me wrong, I'm very attracted to my wife, and I love my wife. And but it's almost like, do we trust God that He can do that and also give us somebody that's going to help us grow in the mission? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, like a shared calling.
Like a shared calling.
I think about like the Trinity, right? So a little doctrinal detour, but Father, Son, Spirit, they each have a role in the salvation work of humanity.
Yeah.
And so, and then the creation, let us make man in our image, and then the two shall become one flesh.
Right, exactly.
So it's almost like marriage was meant to mirror the saving work of God. God has a calling work for every marriage, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, I believe so, and I believe that there's a higher purpose than just my gratification, like why God brought us together, right? He saw that together we can be synergistically have a broader venue or avenue to be a blessing than just us individually. So that's why He brought us together. And our talents and works work together. And I strongly believe He does that. Like that's when it's God leading people together, it's to do that.
And as your heart, as like you're united in heart and mind, it energizes what you do together, and it energizes what you do when you're at work and she's with the kids. But there's this background thing that just energizes whether we're together or we're you go that way, I'll go this way.
Right, exactly. And there's definitely different people she reaches, and there's different people I reach. But it's not we have our conversations sometimes. I'm like, well, do you really need to do this? But I've kind of learned to realize in terms of my role is to help support her in her growth and her ministry, and because she does the same for me. And so, sometimes, as your background, sometimes ministry is sacrifice. Yeah, your time. Sometimes it's just your time. Like, do we really have to have these people over? Do we have to? But then, oftentimes, I've seen that there's a reason why these people are here and all these other things. But anyway, so I ended up completing my PhD, and then I went to North Carolina. Yeah, and I had a postdoc, and so after the first year, I'll speed up a little bit in the story. I kind of was like, man, I'm not sure if I really want to do this, but I just had this strong sense that the Lord didn't want me to leave. And you were saying the other day, I'm going to tell this story. Oh, I love that. Okay, go ahead. So I had this strong sense that the Lord didn't want me to leave, though. Yeah, and but at the same time, I still applied for other jobs because sometimes your emotions can be whatever. So I applied for some other jobs, but everything was closed. But I remember I said, okay, Lord, I have a sense that you want me to stay, but I just need to have confirmation that you want me to stay. So of course I threw out my fleece like Gideon, and it was a very specific fleece. And which was tell us. And my fleece was that we saw new people at Wednesday night prayer meeting. And this is like Podunkville. Yeah, and the thing is, and this is in a town of 3,000 people, and like consistently, it's me and my wife, maybe the pastor, and an elderly couple that I pick up on Wednesdays. Okay, so I was doing that, and so I'm thinking, Lord, you're going to have to bring new people that I have not seen at Wednesday night prayer meeting, and I've been there for a year, so I know the regulars, but it had to be new people. So this would have been a total miracle. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Just imagine your mind. You kind of know who comes to these things. It's like, so it had to be somebody new. This is not like New York City or Minneapolis where there's so many people that this is like 3,000 people. That church maybe has 20 people. Yeah. And on Wednesday night prayer meeting, there's probably 4 or 5 people. Okay. So it has to be new people. Yeah. And I remember thinking, okay, so I got there, we picked him up, got there to church. It was 7:00. There's no one there. In my mind, I'm like skipping, thinking, hey, we're out of here. You're out of here. I'm going to go look for another job. This is amazing. And I still remember, I forgot what we were going through in the Bible, but I remember I was leading prayer meeting, and then I heard a knock on the side door. Yeah. And then I see my wife go to the side door, and she has this motion. And the time was 7:32. Never forget it. It was 7:32. Wow. And like I tell people, I'm not telling you what I heard. This is not somebody else's story. This is my story. I saw 3 people that I'd never seen before walk into that prayer meeting. What? 3 people. Never seen them before. Walk into the prayer meeting. And I said, I guess, Lord, you want me to stay.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, what's really interesting is that, okay, Lord, I'm going to stay. And actually, I got a call from somebody at the community college that was thinking, hey, do you have any plans? What are you thinking about doing? And I was like, you know what? I think I'm at peace. I'm just going to trust. And around that same time, I actually had an opportunity to do a department seminar.
Okay.
And I gave the department seminar. I didn't think it was anything special.
No, exactly. What is a department seminar?
Okay, so sometimes, that's a good question. So sometimes what happens is in departments, and I was in the biology department, they'll have individual faculty kind of present their research to the rest of the department. So I kind of talked about my research or what was going on in the lab. Sure. No one really knew me because I was off to the campus just doing lab work. And so,
like a lab rat.
Yeah.
Who is that dude?
Yeah,
we see him coming.
Yeah. So I gave the presentation, and the chair of the department, he said, you know what? I think that you have the ability to teach. I think you can engage and have the ability to teach. And I was like, okay. And so,
which you had already been thinking about teaching, right?
That was my plan. So I came to this, and it's interesting. My original thing, I'm glad you brought that up. My original thing was to teach. At this moment in time, I was just thinking, I need to get a job. I just got married. Let me just go into the lab, and then we'll see what happens. So teaching had that idea had kind of gone into the back of my mind. I hadn't even really thought about it.
Right.
And so around that same time when that fleece happened, then the chair was like, yeah, I think you have an opportunity to teach. And and the thing is, my boss was okay with it because there had been some changes in the funding that he'd received. And so to supplement my salary, he allowed me to go teach.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So then I started doing some teaching, Bio 101, and just teaching basic things to the students. And I did it for 2 semesters.
At this very school where you're ready to quit your job.
Yeah, where I was ready to quit my job. Right. I was ready to leave, and then I'm teaching. Right. And so let me go to the next part of the story, why this is important. It's important because I remember, fast forward a year.
Yeah.
I'm praying the same prayer. I'm still like, I think it's time for me to leave. And I actually I'm applying for jobs because I'm convinced it's time for me to leave. And this job comes up in Arizona.
Okay.
So I applied to the school in Arizona. And one of the requirements to apply was 1 year of teaching experience.
Which is exactly
what I just had completed because I decided to stay.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, it was a medical school.
And it all started because 3 people walked into a prayer meeting and answered to a fleece.
Yeah. And then next thing you know, I applied to the job. They called me a week later. I had a phone call conversation with them. And then they flew me out sometime in March.
You know what's so interesting about this?
Go ahead.
I'm thinking about those 3 people. They probably don't even know that they are an answered prayer that unleashed the calling in the life of a medical school faculty member.
No. Yeah, they probably know.
Well, it's really interesting to think about.
Exactly.
As we follow Jesus, what are the moments we might get to the kingdom where we go like, oh my, I was an answered prayer. I didn't even know it. Exactly. And I wonder if that's probably I do think that, in our prayers, we can pray that prayer every day. Hey, help me to be a blessing to somebody. That's what I try to do with my family. Yeah.
And sometimes being a blessing is not necessarily, like we talked about, we want to make it, we want somebody to make that decision for Jesus today. It could just be you showing up, saying something, could confirm that stay faithful to God.
I wrote this song called Consume Me, and the chorus goes, make my life your song, God, make my life your prayer, an answer for your children crying in despair. So those 3 were an answer for you.
Yeah, they were. And, it was amazing, that they just were there, and they came because their church, actually, their Wednesday night prayer meeting closed because the wind was strong.
Yeah.
And they actually saw my car. They saw my car at the church, so they decided to come and stop by.
So God sent a strong wind, just like Pentecost, to send 3 people that you never met.
Right.
Wow. So now you're like, we need 1 year of experience.
And now,
and it's off to Arizona.
Yes, and it's off to Arizona. Now I have to step back a little bit in the story because this is very interesting. So I remember after that summer, right before I was going to teach, we're at this dinner, And my boss is, this is like a public place. He's just talking during lunch, maybe dinner. And, to me, I don't really see a lot of talk where people talk about their dreams.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So remember the date. This is the end of July.
Okay.
And he goes, I had this dream that 11 months from now, Samuel's going to be an assistant professor.
Wait. Okay. Now, wow. Wait.
This is 2013. Yeah.
Okay. Where does this fall in relationship to the prayer and the prayer meeting and all that?
So this is after the prayer meeting.
Okay, after the prayer meeting.
After 3 people, and then this is right before I started teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your boss.
And my boss.
At the job that you wanted to leave.
Mm-hmm.
As a dream.
I had a dream that, yes, you're going to be an assistant professor by next year. That was the dream he said. Then he also mentioned about somebody else becoming a postdoc in his lab. And both of them happened. For me, the other person not here to talk about what happened in their life.
I mean, like working for your boss was like working for Nebuchadnezzar. This was a person with anger issues that has dreams.
And he had this dream, and at the time, I was just like, it stuck out to me because I'm like, who talks about their dreams? And then me personally, I don't talk about the dreams I have at dinner with other people. I don't know. But
you just think it was pizza the night before
or something, or he was there. And so he said this at the end of July. I remember because it's the end of summer. So remember that time, 11 months.
Okay.
And so this is the end of June, probably like June 30th. Okay.
The following
July 30th, July 31st. This is 2013.
Okay.
Are you following me?
Yeah. Okay. 13.
Yes.
End of July.
End of July. In 2014, July 1st is when I started my contract as an assistant professor at the medical school.
11 months later.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so I remember thinking, what's going on here? Okay.
Yes.
I know we're going back and forth with the story, but it's good for the audience. They start tracking it. Yeah. And so, and I tell people this, what's really interesting is that I signed up to teach pharmacology.
Uh-huh.
My first pharmacology lecture that I taught was for my job interview.
Whoa. That's pretty intimidating.
Yeah. And I've been teaching pharmacology ever since.
Wow.
10 years.
Wow.
It'll be 10 years, July 1st. Yeah.
You're just like a good farmer outstanding in his field, except it's
pharmacology. Yeah. But that was the first one I had to prepare. I practiced and I gave it, and they were like, okay, this is good enough. Wow. Because I was teaching Bio 101. I wasn't teaching pharmacology, but because of my graduate program, I had some pharmacology background. So
way you go.
The way it worked. And so it's been there. And so, we got, my wife and I, we moved to Arizona, and then we got married, kind of had some kids. Mm-hmm. And then by 2017, I was established at the church, but we moved to Queen Creek, and there was like a little small church plant that was going on there.
And what was the town again?
Queen Creek.
And
so this was kind of linked to actually my current story to a certain extent.
Okay.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
And I remember we were there, and there was a meeting in the afternoon, and I just kind of felt like, Lord, I think you want us here.
Mm-hmm.
They were about to make me a leader in the current church we were going to, which was in Tempe.
Okay.
But I was like, you know what? I kind of really believe you should kind of go to the church that's close to where you're home.
Sure.
That's just me. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but that's just me. So I ended up going there, and
well, a big value, I think, for you is to bring people along. So if you can be close to where you're...
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be like, okay, do you want to come to church? And it's, it's 55 minutes away. That's not practical for most people.
Sure.
And so what we ended up doing is getting involved and getting engaged. And I remember must have been 2019. We decided, let's have an evangelistic series.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting evangelistic series because I remember the first night, like no one showed up. Yeah. And we knocked on doors. We were praying. The speaker's mother ended up passing away. So we had to find a flight, which was a miraculous thing to come. And then we had to find other pastors to fill in for the evangelistic series. But the amazing thing about it is that by the end, in the last night, there was like 30 people at the evangelistic series.
So you went from nobody the first night
to 30.
Which usually it's the inverse.
Yeah, usually it's the inverse, and and what was really interesting is a lot of people just knew about it and saw about it, and and people brought their friends, and a lot of the people are people that were part of the church plant, but they kind of brought their friends or they brought children and what have you, And, it was a blessing. 7 people decided to get baptized at the thing. And well, I remember specifically one man, we just called him Willie. He was 81 years old. He decided to get baptized. And, and it's interesting because everybody that got baptized knew somebody that was there. In fact, there was an older man that he just was quiet, didn't say anything. Yeah, let me get baptized. And it just kind of showed me how, in some ways, God doesn't really need us. You're right, because we can have our plans and we can do all these other things. It's like he doesn't need us. He gives us an opportunity to participate in this, right? We just have to surrender, and are we going to participate? I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it does. I mean, how do you go from 0 to 30?
Yeah,
and then 7 people getting baptized?
And why do you think that's so important to realize? Like that idea that he's giving us the opportunity to participate, but he doesn't really need us.
Well, because I think that's important because it hopefully should open you up to his leading and what opportunity he's putting for you. Because I think sometimes if we try too hard, then we're not allowing God to work. Not to say that we shouldn't prepare and do the things we should do, but I think sometimes we try to answer all the questions, but we don't allow God's answers to come. It's like, the answers will come, the questions will come. Well, let me try to answer the question.
Okay, so it's almost like the prayer is, God, I know you don't need me in this, but so if something's going to happen, you're going to have to show up and do it, and I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, and I think it helps us to keep humble, to remember it's his work. Because like that story, I mean, 0 to 30, 7 people baptized.
Yeah.
But, but unfortunately what happened is my wife and I decided, hey, I think it's time for us to leave. And then the church plant ended up folding, which was unfortunate. But in between then, I actually went to another medical education conference and my wife and I were thinking about moving closer to my family in Texas. We were thinking about moving and, I applied for a job there and I went to an interview sometime in March of 2019, but it didn't work out, Yeah. So I ended up going to the medical education conference later, and I remember I met this guy. I mean, the irony is that I'm not a big conference person, but I go to these conferences now. Yeah. And so I remember I went to one thing just about your career, because I was thinking about maybe it's time for me to leave or go. And I met a guy who actually is an employee at my current institution. And I shook his hand and I was like, I was thinking about applying to that job, because they had posted it, but then it disappeared. Right. And he said, you should have applied. You should think about applying and all these other things. And I was like, okay. So, a couple of weeks later, I come home and then I look again. I was like, well, let me just see if this thing's out there. Yeah. And I see the jobs posted again. Because earlier that year, a couple of months later, it was not there. Gone. And then the next thing you know, it's there. And I remember applying. Now this year I have 5 years of experience, so this is not the first time. Right. So I remember applying, and the process went fairly quickly. And even though, and I got the job, and I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll go to Virginia. I mean, here we go. Here we go. And I remember like just a month or two into the job, I remember I talked to the guy, and he said, we actually put out that job hoping that you would apply. No way. I'm not making this up. He goes, we put out the job, because he didn't have my contact information. Yeah. I didn't have his contact information. He goes, we put out the job hoping that you would apply. So if I had not looked. Wow. If I had not looked and decided to. I mean, this is like when you got into graduate school. I mean, they didn't even call to interview you. They didn't even call you to tell the application was out. It was just like, well, Yeah, we hope that it's you. We hope that he applies, because he said he went to go talk to the person that was in charge of hiring and said, I met this guy at a conference. Hopefully he will apply. So I was like, let's open it up and see what happens. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even tell you all this stuff the first time. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? Yeah, and it's not like these are other Christians putting out a fleece. I mean, it's like your other boss guy that was like, I had a dream. Yeah. So, I think the issue. I think what it is I think we should. That's another point. It's like we have to realize that God is working with everyone in one way or one fashion, right? Yes. And so I think we have to be like Moses. Moses was very humble. Yeah. So when Jethro told him, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, even though Jethro and him didn't agree on everything and believe the same, he listened to see, he can see the wisdom in it. Yeah. So
keeping our eyes open to the ways God is speaking. As Christians will often go, in his word, which he speaks through his word.
Hey, believe me, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, it's the benchmark. It's the baseline. But then, like, he spoke to this guy through a dream. He prompted these guys to put an application online. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, again, it's just transformative. And next thing you know, now I'm here, or now I'm at my current institution in Virginia. And I remember just, looking back thinking and that was very important because there were times, I started my job, the pandemic had started, and my wife, and again, this is why it's so important to marry somebody that's a believer, equally yoked. Because sometimes I would kind of wish, was it the right move to leave? Because in my current position, I'd been there for 5 years. I was starting to get some leadership roles and recognition, and I was well respected. Anytime you make a change and you go to a new place,
it's ground zero.
You have to rebuild that, right? And that's the thing. And it's like, I think that's part of it. What was going on in terms of just learning to humble myself and say, you know what, you might have been here at this one institution, but you're just a new guy at this new institution. Yeah. And so just that, my wife reminded me of this process. It's like, the Lord has you here for a reason. Remember, they put out the job for you. You found it, you applied, and you're here. So that God has a purpose for you.
In case you forgot, I gave you Lindsay to remind you.
Exactly. So sometimes, you see these things working, and I remember, those things are really important to get through those times. And I think part of it was COVID, because I'm a social person, so I like talking to people at work, and I'm sitting at my home, and it seems like a distant past, but I was there for pretty much in my house for almost 18 months working.
Going crazy like everybody else.
18 months working and putting videos together and, Zoom, and, but it's not what, going back full on campus and having that. So that was good. And, during that time, after this at our current church, it started to open. After we opened, we started to see some people didn't come back just like other churches, but then more people were coming back after COVID. And I remember, this must have been 2020, and this brings me to kind of like my current focus. Yeah. I was just kind of mowing the lawn. I think it was a Sunday, and this very clear thought came to my mind, because we were thinking, what should we do with the church? Should we build more? Yeah. Should we, have 2 services? Whatever. Yeah. We had a lot of people because some churches, they just not. It's a small church, but we're just more people. Yeah. And I remember, just as clear as day, it was a sunny day. I was just in my backyard, and I was like, well, why don't we plant a church? Just in theory, I didn't know the where and how it was going to happen. I was like, well, if we have all these extra people, why don't we plant the church and go to a different area? Right. And I remember I called the pastor, and he goes, Samuel, this has been an answer to prayer. I've been wanting somebody to kind of have this vision of planting the church. There's a tendency, I think, for churches in general, planting a church can be scary, because essentially what you're saying is, we're going to intentionally reduce the number of people in this church so they can go to another place. Yeah. And I remember I talked to another elder about it as well. I was like, I think we should go for planting the church. And the pastor was right on it, and he brought in some training from the conference, the church I belong to. And we went through some Acts training, and so now we're starting to build some momentum to
when you have this thought, I think I need to plant a church, or I think we need to
plant a church. Yeah, it wasn't just me, but we need to plant a church. Yeah,
you, your wife, whoever
wants to join. Yeah, not whoever, but people that are serious about it. Yeah.
When that thought goes through your mind, you're not simultaneously thinking, I'm going to leave medical education.
No.
So it's really planting a church on the weekend, I guess.
Yeah, kind of.
While
at work.
During the week, you're a medical educator.
Yeah, I'm at work, yeah.
Which, I'm on this whole journey with, quote, tent making, which in summary, in Acts 18, Paul goes to Corinth. Aquila and Priscilla come to Corinth because Claudius had pushed all the Jews out of Rome. So they land in Corinth. They're kind of immigrants, or, they've been uprooted and replanted. And they happen to meet up. Paul ends up finding out they're tent makers. They say, well, stay with us. So he lives with them. and works with them. And he will say in 1 Corinthians 9, he say, what's my reward of not drawing an income as I proclaim the gospel? He says, my reward is this, that I can offer the gospel free of charge.
Yeah, that's true.
And I find myself thinking, what's really interesting about that is that in today's day and age, sometimes people are skeptical of paid clergy.
Oh, yeah.
But you're not drawing an income from this tent making thing. Your income comes from medical education.
Yeah, for my job. Yeah, my day job.
And
so
God has planted this dream in you to plant a church.
Right. Yeah. And right now, currently, we're trying to build our team, our core team, and go into a new area and kind of build a culture of being in the community, ministries, and really building a church, not for us, but for the community.
Tell me more about what that means. We're not building it for us, we're building it for the community.
Yeah, well, I think what it is that there's a tendency, like if you've been in a church culture for a while, you may look at church and say, well, the church needs this, and this, because this is what I like. But we're not asking the people in the community where this church is going to be, well, how is this church going to serve them? So we want to build a culture of having ministries that actually can minister to the people in the community, not just to us. Not just for us and our needs, because oftentimes, I'll be honest, we build churches for ourselves and what we want, and a lot of times the ministries are focused on us, not necessarily what we can do in the community.
Right, that's great. So that's in the works. Tell me about church at work, or like, I like to think as tent makers, right?
Yeah.
In your case, tent making looks like a medical educator.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like you said, building connections with people. And what I found in my few years is that, people appreciate when you care for them and you're genuine, kind of like Christ's method alone type of thing. You build this rapport, relationship. And so I've had an opportunity to, offer prayer for people, hand out little scripture. We have somebody got me scripture cards from Arizona.
Okay.
So I'll try to hand out scripture to encourage people to some people. And they, what I've found is that people actually appreciate it. They appreciate it because I think it shows that I care. And, just because their relationship with God may not look like yours doesn't mean that they don't want one or desire one or don't have one. It just may not look like yours. And I think sometimes we can cut it off, say, oh, it doesn't look like mine, so this may not be it. But people are on different paths. The Lord's trying to reach. And so I just want to be, at this moment in time, a person that can help them move closer to God.
I find myself starting with the assumption that with the people I interact with every day, people that happen to cross my path, either in a random or regular kind of situation, the assumption that God's already working in their experience.
Yeah. And I think that's the approach we should take. Yeah.
Just this adventure of finding out, well, what's he up to?
Right.
Is there any experience that you feel comfortable sharing in brief to illustrate to our listeners, maybe a short narrative about somebody from your work experience, past or present, where that really stood out to you, that capacity to like minister through prayer or minister through listening, getting to know their story, where you found relational traction that was beyond just the common work relationship, where you really felt the Holy Spirit was leading in it?
Yeah, I think there was one specific instance. It was kind of during the pandemic. I think everybody was kind of stressed. And one of my coworkers, probably a good friend, was just kind of talking about what they were going through. And I remember just, that it's in Jeremiah 29, and just sharing with her very explicitly, here's a verse. God does not he's planning for your good. Yeah. You have to trust and believe in that, and that's because that was years of me being able to talk to her, kind of know where she's at, and just talk to her like full, it's like, hey, I believe God has good for you, and he wants you should trust in that. Jeremiah chapter 29, I believe it's 11 and 12, and that was really kind of one of those moments where it's like, you could tell the person they could appreciate the fact that I was willing to share.
So through a series of exchanges in the years that you had worked together.
Yeah, worked together, worship relationships. Yeah.
You're familiar with her story. COVID comes, and she's experiencing uncertainty.
Uncertainty about the job, uncertainty. I think everybody was. A lot of things, maybe just about the job, what to do.
Yeah.
And just being able to share that experience. You know?
So from your own experience, as well as here's a promise from God.
Yeah, here's a promise from God. Yeah, for sure.
And you sense that she really...
Yeah, she appreciated it. No, I think what it is for her is like a reminder. It's like, yeah, God is there, and he wants... He does plan for good. And I think some people just need to be reminded of that. Everybody may have some sort of bias towards God or these things. And I think it's just important to remind people that God is on their side. Ultimately, he wants the best for them.
Yeah.
Just like he wants the best for all of us. And sometimes it's just to remind people of that. And the best for us, many times will cause us to put away things that we may not like. That's sometimes where we go to, but then also have faith and trust in him. In a more positive sense, and don't get overwhelmed by the negativity or the thoughts of doom and gloom, but seek after him.
Yeah.
Because he will give you hope. And like I said, that kind of stood out to me. There's been some other instances as well where just trying to, talk to people and say, hey, I understand there may be hang-ups about religion and what have you, but really, your relationship with Christ should really be at the center of it, and having those moments and conversations. And you sometimes they don't come all the time, but but sometimes they do. And so I think those are the things you pray for and you hope for. And there's been some other things as well, just even with other believers at work. I haven't done it in a while, but we used to try to have like a monthly prayer meeting. We'd just bring the prayer requests that we had from our coworkers and whatever. We'd come and pray at work. And so I think that I'm trying to, when I get back, we can kind of reestablish that connection with other believers and just those type of things.
I think it probably creates a culture and an atmosphere of God's grace in a place. I think, the Bible says our struggle isn't against flesh and blood. So no matter what people's backgrounds are, no matter what their belief systems are, we live in a world that likes to other.
For sure.
And we're so saturated in fear in today's age. And I remember this experience from, I think, of the book of Joshua, where, the angel of the Lord confronts Joshua, and he's like, are you for us or for them?
Yeah.
And he's like, neither. I'm the commander of the Lord's host. But at the same time, he had come for Joshua because he had a purpose. So we can fall into this trap of othering. But I think is God inviting us to be his people amongst all of his children from the diverse landscape of convictions and beliefs, that when the body of Christ comes together in a workplace with fellow believers, they may not be from your denomination or your church, but if they love Jesus and they're willing to pray, coming together to pray for your workplace can have a tangible spiritual impact.
Yeah. And also, too, it's been a benefit to me. And, like I said, it's been a while, I think also, too, one of the challenges is that the other people are kind of physicians. So it's just being able to find time. But it's been a blessing. I still remember the first one we had. There was a young lady. The lady was having serious issues just because her husband was sick. She was tearing up, and we were praying for her. And so, just creating those atmospheres. I mean, I think, honestly, just creating community at work so that there's a place, there's people that can pray for you or
That's awesome.
support you. And, I've had people that, they ask me, hey, could you, they'll let me know when something's serious, and I say, I'll pray for you and those type of things. And sometimes people respond, some people, whatever. But I try to do that just so people can know that I do. There is a side of me that is more than just life, but I do believe in God, and I do believe that I do believe in his power in situations. And I will say there's probably been another time when I had the opportunity to actually, from the Christian Medical Dental Association, they asked me to actually give a talk at school. And so to me, I was like, well, this is like the highest honor I think in my career I've had. I've done a lot of things, but just some of the students see something in me being able to talk about work-life balance and integration. The interesting thing about it is that I remember one student came up to me afterwards, like the next day, and I made a comment, and I was, it's funny sometimes when you say things, you don't realize it's like, I don't know if people are going to like this. But I told him, I said, hey, you have to be mindful about your relationships too, because we were talking about work-life balance and those type of things, but I was like work-life, I said work-faith integration, not balance, but integration. It should be integrated into your, when you come to work. But then I talked about just personal relationships. It's like you really want to be engaged with somebody that holds your beliefs and that's going to support you in ministry. And it was just kind of something that came to me, and somebody afterwards, a couple of days said, I really appreciate what you said in terms of just being mindful about our relationships and who we decide to become close to. Because again, it comes down to, it's not just about matrimony, it's about mission.
Yeah, love it.
And ministry.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think if we kind of had more of that focus and perspective, it would make things a lot clearer in terms of who you should be yoked with in relationships. And I think also too, it would help in general, just the body of believers as well.
It's not just about matrimony, it's about mission. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a great thought to kind of, we've said a lot today, but that's really powerful. And even like you said, your Lindsay reminding you of God's initiative and call along the way.
Yeah. And I think, and I like to share that just because I think sometimes, it's not like I have it all figured out.
Yeah.
It's like my faith is 100%.
Yeah.
There are times when I can look back and say, hey, I get discouraged. And so having that person in your life, whether it's not your wife or a friend that can remind you of God's calling in your life, because it's not like he lets you go when you make a mistake or you do something bad or what have you. The calling is still there. You just have to be willing to listen, dust yourself off, and continue to walk and listen.
Well, as we make a wrap, would you be willing to pray for our listeners, and maybe specifically for those listeners that are longing for a life companion?
Okay.
That God will give them someone that can journey with them on a calling and a mission.
That's true. I can do that.
All right.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for this time that we can come together and just talk about your goodness and your leading in our lives. And Lord, I want to pray for all those that are under the sound of my podcast or my voice, that those that are longing for a companion, Lord, that they are open to your leading, Lord, and patient for you to reveal the person that they have for them. And then also, Lord, that they are developing and becoming the people that can be with somebody with focus on mission, Lord. And I pray for all of us and just this opportunity which we can talk about your goodness. And I pray that those that hear this that are encouraged and continue to be faithful and walk with you. We ask all these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, we want to thank you for joining us at Intersect. We've been with Samuel Ikonne, talking about mission in marriage, mission in career, and mission in the wider kingdom of God.
Yes. 3 levels.
Yeah.
There's levels to this, all 3 levels.
So may you go and make a difference and be the pastoral presence for your circle of influence.
Amen.